thank you very, very much for coming and watching online if you're here. This is building physical visualizations for cloud services, or more aspirationally, be a cloud DJ. So I'm going to misuse MIDI controllers and electronics and stuff to try to visualize what's going on in cloud systems today. So what's the first thing you think of when I say dashboard? Like, just take an image, put that in your head. We're going to ask the internet by proxy. Do a search, live search, right? That's what you do with talks. So this is what the internet thinks dashboards look like, right? It's all these kind of computer screens and the like. I want us to kind of think back more. The dashboards that we first saw, the computer dashboards, that's like a metaphor for actual dashboards. And kind of go out a little further, like control rooms. Like, you think about what they use to, fly to space or run a nuclear plant. They've got these amazing rooms full of dials and screens and stuff. Wouldn't you want this for your app? Know exactly what's going on? So we're going to talk about that a little bit. And of course, we're going to start with the gauge, because this is kind of the most fundamental thing. And the big thing I want to just this is not going to be like an amazing things you never knew were possible before talk, but it is way easier than it used to be. So that's the kind of takeaway from this, is making ambient visual versions of the stats that you collect on your applications is way easier than it could be. So this is a little analog panel meter from Adafruit. And what this looks like from a code perspective is pretty straightforward. So this is Python. The main bit is right here. We set PWM, so how often the signal is up. So we're giving it power, and kind of like more or less of that. And let's see if I can, let me actually just copy this. And then we'll give this a try. So there's this library called Pi, GPIO, and so general purpose I/O pin. And then, of course, the initialization. This gets a little recursive. It's pi gpio.pi. So we can kind of start and end with the same thing. And then, actually, if we could switch over to this screen over here, we've got a live panel meter, one of these meters set up. And there we go. That's all there. And we give it a value between 0 and 255, because that's the natural state of numbers. So we do that. And I hit enter. Woo! Isn't that amazing? So at some level, that's kind of like, yeah, whatever. But now I can put that in any box or cardboard thing, or hook it up to any cloud API or anything you're gathering metrics on, and you just feed it numbers, and it moves around. Which, I don't know, I'm I'm kind of excited about this. And so, like, this is a little spike that just kind of moves it up and down as you go. So I think this is kind of like the fundamental initial thing. Like, you can get pretty far with this. Like, think about like requests per second, CPU usage, some sort of capacity issue, anything that's kind of a proportion of a whole. You can go pretty far with this. So that's pretty straightforward. And this is what's going on in the covers. Is there's a Raspberry Pi, which I'll show you in a second, and I've plugged in 2 cables and a resistor, or 2 wires and a resistor, and we're good to go. So pretty straightforward. But I mentioned DJ, right? So, like, could we go a little further than that? I think we could. So we want to get closer to that control room kind of idea, and that means blinky lights. We need lots of blinky lights. And if there's anybody who's good at blinky lights, it's electronic musicians and DJs. So, like, if you look for electronic instruments, there's all kinds of things out here. And most of these talk over a protocol called MIDI, which is just bytes sent over serial. So it's either actual serial cables or showing up as USB, which means we can talk kind of bidirectionally to all these things. So the keyboards can feed into us, and the lights we can light up from the computers. I don't even know what that is, but we need to check it out later. But I have one of these here, and so this is a launch pad. And so we can connect that and actually visualize, with our amazing high-density display of 8x8 LEDs, what's going on in a system. And the system I'm going to visualize is Kubernetes, because that's what I work on the most these days. It's amazing, and if you're doing Docker containers or containers running on a lot of machines, definitely check it out. That's not what this talk is about at all. So for the purpose of this talk, you've got a bunch of computers, and you've got programs running on them. So you've got processes running on them, right? And so now I have an API to see what processes are running on which computer and how loaded they are and all this kind of stuff. So we can come back over here. And shall we live dangerously? We unclip, I wasn't kidding about a resistor and a wire. We unclip that guy, and then we've got a launchpad hooked up. And what you can't see on my screen is Kubernetes has a command line tool where I can say, hey, I'd like to run 10 copies of this or 50 copies of this. And right now the cluster, so the visualization I've done is vertically, we've got computers. So this is representing 8 computers. And there's 2 processes on this one and 1 on this one, and good to go. So I can say, oh my gosh, our website's gotten really busy. I actually want to run 25. And I hit enter. And this, maybe this is an ambient display up on a wall somewhere, and everybody who walks by is like, oh, wait, wow, lots going on today. And then as it goes back down, maybe it goes down to 5, and Kubernetes jumps up really fast and then kind of goes down a little more gradually. So we can see that happening. So actually, I've learned something about the way Kubernetes manages processes. Super active about getting them started, and then they kind of pick up there. So already I've learned something. I went down to 5 this time, not 3. So that's fun. And this also is very straightforward. There's a library called Pi Launchpad. You grab that, install a few things, and you're good to go. So, and the way you talk to it is there's an XY grid, and you just poke, 1, 4, set that to green, set it to red, and it lights up. So, okay, what really happened behind the scenes here, right? Because this actually, when I hit the button there, I was actually logged in SSH to a machine in the cloud, talking over the command line tool to an API. I've got another process that's watching. Actually, I'm pulling because I did this last minute, but watching the Kubernetes API for what happened, and then updating the display and pushing that to a message queue. And then on the Raspberry Pi, it's sitting waiting on the message queue to see what happened. And so if any new messages comes in, it displays them. So when I hit enter there, that went enter to SSH in the cloud to an API, something else that read the API, put it in a message queue, came down through my phone, wireless to the Raspberry Pi, and lit up. Which kind of a lot of moving parts. But because there's a message queue in between these, I can add more devices, more visualizations. You can have a web-based version of this, all hitting the same queue. So you can kind of publish your messages, your stats, into queues, and then various different programs can listen to that and see what's going on. So what else could we do with 8x8 LEDs? So this is kind of one of those design constraints kind of exercises in a way. So what I did here was processes on computers. Not really using the color. We could imagine, for example, each process, how much of its assigned CPU it was using. It could go more to the red or green. You could arrange things differently. Kubernetes has this idea of kind of process groups that it calls a replication controller. So instead of grouping by physical machine, which maybe isn't so meaningful, you could group by logical parts of your system, or anything that makes sense for your app. And there's tons of other stuff. So one, this device is actually an input device. It's a MIDI controller. So what needs to happen next? So here's on my personal aspirations list for this stuff. When you hit one of the buttons, then it actually sends a command back up to the system, and then we can kill that process. And then it goes away. So that one would go away. And then we've got Chaos Monkey. Have you guys heard of Chaos Monkey? You've got your cloud systems, you've got some process that runs and just deletes stuff randomly, so you make sure that your system is actually robust. And then I think one of my colleagues suggested this, you actually recruit a 3-year-old to play on your system and see whether it's actually robust. That would be crazy. There's also other little RGB LED displays that you can get. And I was imagining a handheld version of this that you could carry around with you. And this morning I built it, so it totally exists. And so this is a Raspberry Pi, and like it totally works. Here, let me bump this up to 25. Also going through my phone, so hopefully it'll come up. And yay, there's more going on. So then you could like set this anywhere. Like you walk over to your colleague's desk and be like, so keep an eye on that. Or what's going on here? I don't know. That's kind of crazy, but I think that would be super fun. And since I already had the infrastructure in place, these messages were flowing, and I had the rough code for an agent, all I had to do was swap the library out for talking to that display versus the Launchpad. And I actually did that in the hotel this morning. And so then there's all kinds of different devices. So this is a different MIDI controller, and it's made to be your faders for audio control. But this could easily be like system controls, right? Maybe you turn it up and down. You want to get a feel for how your system actually works. You can have your own control center. So that's actually the crux of this talk. Just think about the things you have and which of the knobs, because we talk metaphorically about knobs and dials on our systems all the time and having displays and meters and metrics. Is there a place where it would really make sense to bring that out into the physical world, where people visiting your office or colleagues could actually interact with a part of your system in a very physical, real way? And I guess that's kind of the root of this. For a little bit of inspiration, if you do a search on MIDI controller, they're super diverse. And in a way, the MIDI protocol is, it's like so many other things we use in software. It's this real-time evented system. So you can wire all this up into the rest of your systems you're running. So you can have keyboardy displays, these button kinds of things, sliders and knobs. This is it's a grid, but each grid is sensitive to like vibration in each direction. So you can do more subtle things. Anyway, give it a look. Consider bringing your systems out into the real world. And that's it. Thank you very much. And I think, oh yeah, we've got time for questions. Does anybody have any Q&A you want to do? And no. Okay, we're done. Thank you very much.